a reclamation of our worthiness. The pursuit of radical self-love is not the pursuit of something outside of us. It is the return to that which we have always been. The work of radical self-love is about removing that past, removing the story of that past as the definitive treatise on who we are in the world and who we'll get to be in the world. Radical self-love gives us the foundation to create vision. The vision is not about attaining something that doesn't exist. The vision is about unlocking that which is already inside of us.
Welcome to this podcast. Today is an exciting day as it's the start of Diwali and the Style and Presence Summit. This summit feels like the most perfect tonic for now. Diwali is such a powerful time, in alignment with the new moon, a festival of lights. In India, this is like Christmas and New Year, a time of celebration, togetherness, and ritual. Even though a Hindu festival, it is in some way celebrated by all as time is given off work, just like other cultures do for Christmas. I will be celebrating this year with conversations and ritual with some of the most powerful women I know through the hosting of this online summit, Style and Presence, a reclamation of worth. It's a time for us to shine our inner lights and a time for us to amplify each other's lights. The summit is offered in the spirit of the gift, meaning it's free, and is open to all those who identify as women. Today's episode is an opportunity for all to experience a part of this summit. If you want the whole thing, there are 52 incredible women speakers, some you will know from the show, and some treasures we haven't introduced here yet. It's open to all of you, and we are live till the end of Sunday. If you hear this after it's finished, you can still join by purchasing the collection of the sessions, which also supports us and all the speakers. Style and Presence invites us to join together for a potent celebration and exploration into our self-worth as women and how this relates to the worth of the world. As we stand here in 2020 with everything that has come to the surface, we see we are living in a world of distortion and destruction, and at the same time, beauty and possibility. The systems of patriarchy, colonization, and neoliberalism have culminated in our worth being for sale in blatant and subtle ways. White women paying to tan, brown women bleaching their skin light, people dying to make clothes that are worn once. The list goes on and on. These insecurities feed a whole system of modern-day slavery, toxic chemical dumping, and landfill waste as we struggle to keep up the pressures and wear our perfect masks. All this energy on the exterior can take precious time away from the inner healing and the real transformative work these times are calling forth in us. There is another path, the way of the empowered woman or man who is co-creating a beautiful future. This summit wakes us up to the knowledge and embodiment that we are worth more than this cycle of fear, greed, and exploitation, reminding us how to move away from this toxic culture into one of cultivating both style and presence. True style comes from the heart. It's knowing who we are and what is important to us. It's responding to the times we live in, an ecological and human rights crisis, and with compassion, expressing our creativity through how we show up in the world. Presence is being in authenticity with this, so we can radiate our truth in whatever situation we are in. We become somebody that turns heads when we walk in a room because we are in alignment with ourselves and our feminine power. This is about more than what we wear, but who we are, coming into our wholeness and reclaiming all the parts of ourselves that we may have cast out or never before discovered within. We cultivate our style and presence by deepening our true self-worth and understanding our relationship with what we are here to contribute to the worth of the world. From this place, we can open new pathways to healing, joy, and activism that mirror our sense of love and worth with our relationship to each other and the earth. Style and Presence invites us into this deeper dance with all of life. Style and Presence is our reclamation of worth. You can find the link and register over on the events page at www.amisha.co.uk or go directly to styleandpresence.com. Another reminder that we are still waiting for more of you to share in our little sexy questionnaire about what kind of digital, global, online space you want. So if you haven't done that yet, please do spend 5 minutes. We've had a very small amount of you take part in this. And as we're going to spend time and resources in creating this space for you, we want to make sure that it serves your needs and that it will be something that is useful and is used and really allows us to connect to each other. So you can find this questionnaire if you go onto our website, www.thefutureisbeautiful.co, and click on community and support, and the link is there at the top, and we're also sharing it in all of our newsletters at the moment. My guest this week is Sonya Renee Taylor, the founder and radical executive officer of The Body Is Not an Apology, a digital media and education company with content reaching 500,000 people each month. She's the author of a book of the same name, which I will say again because it is so powerful just in itself. The Body Is Not an Apology. Sonya's work as an award-winning performance poet, activist, and transformational leader continues to have global reach. She is a former national and international poetry slam champion, author, educator, and activist who has mesmerized audiences across the US, New Zealand, Australia, Germany, England, Scotland, Sweden, Canada, and the Netherlands, as well as in prisons, mental health treatment facilities, homeless shelters, universities, festivals, and public schools across the globe. I highly recommend following Sonya on Instagram, where she shares really potent and powerful videos very regularly. Her perspective is one that we really need more of in this world, and that we need to be centering, we need to be listening to, and we need to be allowing it to open that place within ourselves. In this conversation called Stitching Tapestries of Worthiness, we explore the themes of radical self-love, authenticity, and community as we contemplate the question, how do we stitch a new garment that fits all of humanity and nature? We hope that you enjoy this conversation and that it gets you off the ladder and into a place of radical self-love. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. Sonya, I am absolutely delighted to be here with you. Thank you for coming to share some of your wisdom and joy.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And so this story of how we met is now one that people know quite a lot about, as you shared with Brené Brown on her podcast recently. I found your work earlier this summer. I saw this quote and it really spoke to me. I shared this quote through The Future is Beautiful and on my own social. And then I saw it after that. And then, then I looked you up and I started to delve into all of the things that you were sharing. And then I saw the quote attributed to Brené Brown and I got really like, what? And then I had to investigate further what had gone on. Yeah, it got me thinking, not only how common we know that is, especially with white men and the silencing of voices of women, voices of color. I think the thing I found the most absurd about it is that somebody, and it wasn't Brené Brown, but somebody sat down, read that quote and put her name there. And it just baffles me who that person was and why they did it. And do they do that with lots of quotes or
Well, they didn't just put her name on it. They put her face on it. So the quote that went viral after the quote sort of went viral with just my name on it in the words. And then someone took a picture of Brené Brown, put the words on top of Brene Brown's face and then put Brene Brown's name at the bottom. So it felt like an extra effort. Like they really decided to make it a project.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that that's what somebody was doing with their time.
Right.
It really asks this question of like, what else that we see and just assume, of course, well, like, why would that person's face be on it if it's got nothing to do with them? Like, how much of that then must be in our world and in our culture? And why whoever did that deemed that these words in your name was not worthy of whatever. It's such a strange question.
Well, it makes me want, I mean, I have all kinds of conjecture, and of course I don't have any answers, but I do have some conjecture. So much of the internet is about the desire to sort of experience this viral fame, to get as many likes as possible, to have as many people as possible see whatever it is you posted. So I understand if that is the instinct from which a person is operating, then yeah, would you put a famous white lady's name on the bottom of a thing and circulate it? Are you probably going to get more likes than some random woman's name that you don't know and your community knows? Probably. I could certainly see the impetus to do that. It is outside of my own sort of internal navigation of integrity and honesty and all of those other things. But from the desire to like get more likes, to have more people look at it, to have more people click back to your page, like I could see how that might have happened. And it really does speak to just how sort of shallow our seeking for connection and validation has become.
Yeah, it takes us really to the heart of this issue of worth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like we need to share what the quote was.
Probably. I know we're burying the lead a little bit. We probably should.
The version of the quote that I have, knowing that I got it off the internet, so it might not be true, is we will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalized greed, inequality, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, ... We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature.
Yeah. Can I read that? There's a remaining part that I always got cut off. So I'd love to read the remaining part.
Please.
What we have been forced to leave behind, we needed to leave behind. What is getting us through is what we will need to take us forward. All the rest of it is up to us. So dream. While we have so much time, dream of the life you want. Dream of the world you desire to exist in. Look for the places in your new dreams that have parts of the old world and remove them. What is the dream then? From there, we can add to the collective weaving of whatever it is that is to be next. If we're going to heal, let it be glorious.
Oh, that's beautiful. And the internet didn't deliver me the rest of those words until now. So I'm pleased that you were here. Yeah, what an invitation.
Yeah. I certainly wanted people to receive it as an invitation. I believe this moment that we've been in collectively is indeed an invitation. Maybe not the party we wanted to get invited to, but it's the party we're at. And so since we're here, what will we do with it? And for me, it just became very clear that it was like, oh, we're being given this grand pause so that we can actually see what it is that we've been in and then choose from a place of awareness, choose from a place of possibility what it is that we actually want. In many ways, for as wildly painful as this time has been for so many people, it has also been a time filled with massive possibility. I think we get to be in what I like to call the great both and. We get to be in all of it, all the complexity of it.
And in a way, what you're saying about this time, I definitely feel like as a collective turning point, that's where we are. I feel like there are things that I have been talking about for years and people haven't really been deeming to be valuable or important. And then I've questioned is this valuable and important? Because why is no one getting it, or not enough people? And I felt within myself during this time a real like anchoring into my own sense of worth in what I see, what I vision, what I value, and to want to live a life and live in a world that honors the beauty of what this opportunity is that we all have right now, and always have. And that's what lies in all moments as a human. But at this time there's like a collective one, and I feel like that's why these words of stitching a new garment really captured me.
What I find most fascinating is that we are in this collective moment where it's very obvious that we're a collective. Like, it's very obvious that we are interdependent. It's very obvious that what one does impacts the other in a way that I think has been easily obscured for a multitude of reasons, right? And the sort of mythology of individualism has been very easy for people to take up, except when you're in a global pandemic. And then you're like, oh no, actually, everything we do has the potential to impact, or is impacting the other one way or another, whether we can see it or we cannot. It offers us a different kind of opportunity. One of the things that I've been saying in this season is that if we are in a time of contagion, then what do we want to spread? If we are in a time where things spread, and I don't believe that that is an isolated experience, right? Like, I don't think it's like, oh, the whole world has this one thing we're spreading, and that's the only thing that gets spread. Clearly, that's not true. Conspiracy theories get spread and mass fear gets spread, and we are in a time of contagion. And so if we're in a time of contagion, what do we want to spread? And let's get intentional about that. Let's be specific about that. Let's root it in the world we want to see. And then let's pull out our needle and thread and get to stitching.
What is it that you feel called to stitch the most?
I've been very clear that like radical self-love is my garment. It's the thing I was told to make. It will look different at different times, but whatever it is I'm making, that is the base of the garment. It's the base of the garment because I feel very clear that nothing else will weather the tumultuous storms that life plans to stick us in, that life will inevitably give us. And if it is not situated on our own sense of inherent worth, our own sense of divinity, our own sense of divine enoughness, then we will start to try to make things externally that validate that. We already live in those systems. That's the thing we don't want to go back to, is the system where we try to externally validate our worth. I'm interested in stitching a world where we are so aware, so present, so embodied in our enoughness, in our worthiness, that there isn't anything to make in the external world except that which we already know, like that which is an extension of our worthiness, that which is an extension of our sense of enoughness, that which is an extension of our own divinity. That's what I want us to make out in the world. And I want us to make it from that place, from that particular foundational fabric.
This notion of style and presence, which had been sitting with me as a book for, say, seven years. And I was finding that because I was wanting to look at worth from a perspective of both how we feel about ourselves, and especially as women, people that identify as women, what we buy and how we're targeted at to long for things. And then from working in sustainable fashion for a long time and really understanding what's happening in the fashion industry, but it's every industry, about how we make things and the modern day slavery that exists in order to often create things that don't even have that much meaning when they come into the lives of who they're going to. One of the difficulties that I was having was that the publishers were like not really sure about like bringing these things together. Like, but what is this about? And I'm like, it's about worth. It's about the relationship between our worth and the worth of the world, and how these things aren't separate. They're completely the same thing. And that we need to understand it from both of these sides. And as this book, partly when there were slight doors open, my own worth maybe stop me from opening them fully or stepping through them, or other things would come in that would distract. But as I was sitting there in the lockdown, and I'm still pretty locked down in terms of my human physical time. I have a very healthy Zoom life, if that counts for anything.
I think that's true for many of us still.
Yeah. And what really came was that this is a year of reclaiming worth. And when it was a book, the subtitle was actually Take Off Your Masks and Wear Your Authenticity, which obviously
and then that didn't work so much with me.
Yeah, different meaning at this time. And I don't want to be the spreader. I don't want to be misinterpreted as a conspiracy theory. But then actually the words that came were a reclamation of worth, which is radical self-love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. From the sort of framework that we work with at The Body is Non-Apology, which is my digital media and education company. There's the book. Hey!
It's a wonderful book. And I have to say that when my 2-year-old niece saw this book, and she was first annoyed that I was trying to read a book rather than
engage her.
And then she went, "Oh, wow, that lady is a goddess."
I love it. That seems to be, it's fascinating. It's the response of toddlers. You and many other people with very little children have that response to the cover. I think it is because they are so close to the source of their own sense of radical self-love that they recognize it when they see it. They're like, oh, this lady is really talking about this thing. I know what that is. Yeah, there's some level of recognition for little kids in that. And I think that goes back to what I was going to say, which is that for us, the idea of reclamation is that we arrived on the planet as radical self-love, that we came here in right relationship with our own worthiness. We came here in right relationship with our own beings, our own bodies, and the beings and bodies of others. It is the system of capitalism, the system of white supremacy, the system of ageism and homophobia, and all of these systems of oppression that we live inside of that have stolen that have buried it underneath layers of shame and unworthiness and disconnection and dis-ease and all of these other things. And so it is indeed a reclamation of our worthiness. The pursuit of radical self-love is not the pursuit of something outside of us. It is the return to that which we have always been. It is an invitation back to ourselves as our source relationship, to ourselves as that 2-year-old understands herself. That's what we're being invited back into. So yes, I definitely see those as the same thing.
Can you tell us more about the framework that you have created and laid out in a really powerful, practical, and provocative way?
Thank you. We use this idea of radical to describe self-love for some really specific reasons. One, because radical speaks to being inherent in a thing. It speaks to going to the source or foundation. It speaks to proposing thoroughgoing or extreme change or transformation. And it speaks to changing the political, social, and economic systems and structures of a thing. So those are the actual definitions of the word radical. And I was like, yes, I want a love that does that. When I heard it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's exactly the kind of love I'm interested in. And I believe that's exactly the kind of love that we came here with. We came here understanding our inherent relationship of value. We need a love that is thoroughgoing and extreme, particularly in the face of the thoroughgoing and extreme hatred and disconnection and devaluing that so many bodies experience. I'm interested in a love that changes the political, social, and cultural systems of our world, economic systems of our world. And if it doesn't do that, then what's it for? That's the way I feel. Like if it doesn't change the world, then, I tell people this in my workshops. I say, as adorable as all of you are, I have very little investment in your individual self-esteem and self-confidence because it doesn't do anything for me. Like It doesn't change my life. I am not altruistic. I'm in this work because I want a world that works for me. And the world we are in right now does not. It does not work for my fat, Black, queer, neurodivergent body. I'm interested in promoting something that actually gets me free. It just so happens because our freedom is intertwined, it'll get you free too. And, isn't that awesome? That is why it's radical. And that is why radical self-love is not self-esteem or self-confidence, these more fleeting, sort of transient terms that often define us based on very specific moments in time that shift and change all the time. There are days I feel really confident because I got a cute pair of earrings on and someone complimented me. And I'm like, yes, I did the earring thing today.
I did that.
Thank you. You helped my self-esteem today, my self-confidence. But I could also have another Zoom meeting and someone hate them, and then I don't feel as confidently. Those things they're not foundational. They're not sturdy enough to hold up a changed world.
Like flapping in the wind if we
they're just very easily shifted, changed, and they're individual. They are about how we feel about ourselves. And given that we are interconnected and require interdependence to actually thrive as a species, we need something that recognizes and holds the synthesis of those relationships. And again, that in my worldview is radical self-love. That is what radical self-love is. The work to be able to better live into it. In the book, we call it thinking, doing, being process. First, we have to actually raise to consciousness the ways in which we are disconnected from our own sense of divineness, our own sense of enoughness. We have to raise to consciousness the beliefs that we have about ourselves, about our own bodies, about our own lives. And then we have to raise to consciousness the beliefs we have about others and recognize where the systems of comparison are governing how we're in relationship with other people, recognizing the ways in which we've been told that we are okay based on ladder of hierarchy that tells us that we are positioned either above someone or below someone. And recognize the ways in which that operates in our daily lives, recognize the ways in which we have adopted and internalized those messages. And then once something is conscious, we are at choice. Once we're not in the default of that anymore, and we're actually in the daily understanding of it, then we actually have choice about our behaviors and our actions. And we can say, I don't actually want to do that anymore. I see how this decision that I'm about to make is a reflection of my not thinking I'm good enough. I don't actually have to have undone that belief to not act on it because I'm at least conscious of it. And by the choice to do something different, we begin to create a new way of thinking. The process changes because we experience something different. Through that process of thinking and doing and the repetition of that, we create a new way of being in our bodies, a new way of being in our lives. And that new way of being is the being of radical self-love. It is being in the world from a place of recognizing our worthiness, recognizing our inherent enoughness.
Beautiful. And I wonder, can you share more about the ladder? We don't even always know that we're on the ladder.
No, I mean, it's the diabolical brilliance of the system is that it has us plugged into something we don't even notice we're plugged into. It has us climbing something half the time we don't even notice we're climbing. In the book, I describe it as a system of bodily hierarchy. And we situate this work of radical self-love, at least in the book. In my larger work, I describe the body as both a physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental entity. So it is the whole of us. It is not just the corporeal portion of us. But in the book, I talk about the corporeal portion of us, our physical bodies. And I talk about that because it is an easy way for everybody to find themselves in the conversation because everybody has a body and you can't do this ride without one. And we live in a world that gives us messages about our bodies and about whether or not those bodies are okay for a variety of reasons. The message of whether or not those bodies are okay keeps us trying to figure out how to attain our worthiness, how to attain what makes us valuable in the world. And that is the ladder. The ladder are all the systems and structures that exist to help us externally define whether or not we're good enough. And those systems are, all the isms live in those systems: racism and ableism and ageism, and all the obias live there too: transphobia and homophobia, and capitalism, all of those structures that we are told validate us. Those are all the ladder. They are the ladder. And we are always trying to situate ourselves on the highest point or higher up on the ladder, because certainly in most of the Western world, the top of that ladder is reserved for white, cis, able-bodied men. Those are the bodies that the world assigns the most value to. Then all the rest of us fall in there someplace. In many ways, certainly again, in the Western dichotomy, the bottom of the ladder, in my experiences, is Blackness, and whatever relationship we all have to Blackness, and the ways in which we are either trying to escape it or figure out where we live inside of it. And then that is the ladder. And that, again, that ladder is also able-bodiedness. That ladder is also thinness. That ladder is all the ways in which we have what in the body is not the default body, the body that we say is a good body. And we are all vying to get up higher on that ladder. I think what we all fail to realize is that even the people at the top of the ladder are not happy. They're not actually winning in the sense of enoughness. They don't feel inherently enough, which is why you need to figure out how to make $10 gazillion, right? Like, you would only need to make $10 gazillion and keep it all if that was how you were defining your worthiness in the world. The ladder keeps us all scrambling for some external anchor to define ourselves. When we stop looking for an external anchor to define ourselves, we make the ladder not necessary. The ladder becomes obsolete. It doesn't need to exist. The work of radical self-love is to divest from that ladder of bodily hierarchy, and to invest in our inherent divinity, our radical self-love.
It's so potent. So like you can just feel like moments when you've been caught on that ladder.
On the ladder.
And as we're talking about like this thing of style and presence and like why I never wrote this book, and it was a lot to do with that ladder. Like at first it was like publishers that were like, this is too complex. It needs to be more simple. Like, which one of these things is it about? And I'm like, but the whole point is it's about both.
Right. The point is they're connected.
Yeah, but I wasn't high enough on the ladder to be talking about both. And then going through all those conversations of like, okay, well, how many people are on your newsletter and how many followers do you have on this and how many, and I was like, it seems quite a lot for me, whatever it means. But then having like agents be like, yeah, it's not really that many compared to like other places on the ladder. And I'm like, okay. And I feel like I just got really tired trying to figure out how to get myself in a place within that ladder where I was valid enough, worthy enough to talk about worth. And like, it's interesting because I kind of pulled way out of that. It just used to drive me insane because I would also come across the racism and all of these other things. And I spent evenings thinking, if I didn't use my real surname, but I like had a surname that was easier to say and write, would that help my work? And the reality is probably would, and then I'd be like, well, is it more important to like change my name to get higher up the ladder? Or is it more important to like carry my name and do the ancestral healing on like what that name means and what that name has been through and where I can take it? And I've thought a lot about these different things along the way. And what was really interesting is I just got to a place where I just thought, I don't even care anymore. I'm just going to talk to who I want. I'm not going to care about where it fits. I kept getting stuck with the proposal as well. So I had an agent, but then they kept telling me that I was doing the market comparison bit wrong. And I was like, can you guys just help me? Because I'm not a book selling marketeer.
Right. Right.
Like, I don't know.
You do that part, please. That's your area.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. She said you picked too many categories, and I'm like, well, I don't know which category. You tell me which category it goes in, right? Like, you tell me which books it compare. Like, I don't know, and I don't even want to have to try and compare it because that's pulling me into the system that doesn't feel comfortable. I'm just like now using this opportunity with you here to just clear some of this
Good.
and move forward. And so, because then I've given myself a lot of like, oh, well, I had an agent, and if I just worked harder, I could have made that happen like that many years ago, and this and like the reality was I just couldn't. Like it was too hard. I was so tired of being thrown down when I was climbing. Like it was like someone kept shaking the ladder, and I was like climbing up it, doing what I thought I was meant to do, be able to just be who I am in the world and pay my bills. People were shaking the ladder, and then I was like, at first I was like, I will keep clawing. and then I was just like, I surrender. Like, and kind of going through this process. And then I think I just started doing things my own way and in a small way, not really caring. I don't know if it's because of an internal shift or if it's also because the world has been changing during those times. But then I experienced that when you're not like wrestling with that system, it can be possible that you find a more easeful, joyful, connected route. It may be slower and it may be smaller, but it's beautiful.
Exactly.
And then you don't wake up feeling really stressed all the time. And like, then actually, who wants to have to worry about how many followers they have on Instagram? And I just found that like having to justify things like that to get meetings, it was just like hurting a part of my soul that didn't want to be hurt like that anymore.
The part of you that didn't want to be on the ladder. I mean, I think what's so interesting in your anecdote is that our true selves, our radical self-love self, doesn't desire to be on that ladder. Our radical self-love self always feel discordance, tension, dis-ease when we are trying to operate in that system, because it is not authentic to who we are. It's the reason why we never actually feel good. It's the reason why there is no top of the ladder, because it actually is not designed to deliver you the thing you think you want, which is a sense of satisfaction, a sense of I did it, because that the ladder is designed to tell you that you never got to the top. Otherwise, you would get off. Right?
And you're looking for safety, right? If you come from immigrant families, it's like, get yourself to where it's safe. That's the mantra, the way of life for immigrants.
Yeah. And there is no safety in that system. And particularly for any of the bodies that the system says are less valuable, there isn't a safety in that system. There's only an illusion of safety. But again, our inner selves recognize that we don't feel good there. You know, I'm of the mindset that if it doesn't bring me peace, power, joy, or ease, then it's probably not radical self-love. And so when I check in with myself and I'm like, oh, right, that doesn't feel into any of those places. You know, I feel disconnected. I feel like I need to try harder. I feel like I need to like struggle again or break in. And I've spent many, many years of my own life in that dynamic. I got clearer and clearer that it was not a reflection. It was coming from my need to prove that I was good enough, my need to prove I could do it, my need to prove that people listen to me and care what I say. And that every time I tried to be in the game of proving, I felt less and less like myself. I felt less and less worthy inside of that system, inside that container.
Yeah, because it is about proving yourself and having to just reform yourself into like the way that makes sense to the system. And
to the system. Exactly.
And now I take so much joy in messing with that system. And so with like hosting a podcast, you write to people and you say, I would love for you to be on the show. And normally their assistant writes back and asks you, well, how many people listen to your show?
Yep.
And what I do now is I write back and I say, I am proud of the community that we have that are part of The Future is Beautiful. I am afraid I cannot answer your question because it pulls us into the old paradigm of worth. I understand that that's how people decide what's worthy of their time. And so if this isn't for you, I totally understand. And it's no issue. But if you feel a resonance to be on this show, to share, to be part of creating the beautiful future with me, then I would love that. And actually, what I found is that more often than not, the assistants come back and be like, okay, sorry, yeah, they'd love to do it. And yeah, because it's like actually that provocation of like, okay, well, yeah, if you go on, it's an hour or 2 hours of your time, and if you go on that one and they've got however many million, whatever, and then that's a better use of time. But then maybe it's like if you go on this one, there is that person that really needs to hear you, that's going to hear you, and that's a worthy use of time. And then it takes you into that place of feeling the resonance, and that the goal isn't always just bigger, more, higher up the ladder, but the goal is living in truth and living in radical self-love.
Yeah, I think that piece about resonance is so important, that it's an interesting dance, right? Because, and particularly, it's an interesting dance in a world that is so extractive. One of the things that I experience oftentimes is like people will ask me to be on their podcast. There isn't an offer of relationship, there's an offer of extraction. And that extraction is, hey, I recognize that you might bring listeners to me. And so please do my thing, right? And I'm like, what do I get? Again, I'm honest about the fact that I'm not altruistic. I want to know what I get. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be money. It doesn't mean it needs to be book sales. It needs to be something. It needs to be connection. It needs to be resonance. It needs to be alignment. And so I really invite us, and this is something I've been talking about a lot lately in my work, is about what is right relationship, and how do we recognize right relationship, and how do we define currency differently through the lens of right relationship. Whatever the exchange is, that it is indeed an exchange, and that exchange doesn't have to be likes or dollars or anything, but it needs to be an intention that we be in exchange with one another. And what does that look like? I love the invitation that you're giving to people to check in with themselves, to check in with resonance, to be present to what is the actual offer here.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I also ask for 2 hours. Often the same people that are like needing to know numbers are also trying to squeeze that time. And I get it. People are busy. But for me, I'm like, well, this isn't like a wham bam, thank you, ma'am experience, because it's not about just having someone's name. Like for me, it is about relationship and it's about connection. And so it's about us being able to have just chatted, laughed a little bit, and got to know each other a bit before and afterwards, and to be able to be in a space of real collaboration and that's not transactional, because then it takes us into that place of being able to stitch together, and that needs a little bit of spaciousness. So that's the ladder. What do you recommend people do when they realize how gripped to the ladder they are? They're getting like sores on their hands,
calluses, hanging onto the ladder. Absolutely. So, I mean, it's the reason that I wrote the book is because I wanted us to have practical, everyday ways to divest from the ladder. I like to tell people all the time, the work is simple. It is not easy. It's not easy. Our whole identity is tied up in it. It's going to take some intentionality, and it's going to take some really getting to the core of our stories of our own worth, because that's what keeps us hanging to the ladder. Is there's a story about our worth, about our validity and value in the world, and that the ladder is there to give us some external anchoring of who we are. The first step to letting go of the ladder is to start to be honest about the stories you told yourself that have you on the ladder in the first place. And oftentimes those stories are the stories of our childhood. They're the stories of our youth. They're the stories of, the shames and unmet vulnerabilities that have occurred in our lives that have shaped how we see and understand ourselves. There's some revisiting that we have to do, some revisiting to those original stories. Again, that's part of the bringing it to consciousness, to the thinking piece, is actually thinking about, how did I get on the ladder in the first place? I got on the ladder because when I was 5, my family lost all their money, and I realized that and then all of a sudden we were poor, and I was the one who was teased in school. And so I was like, oh, I'm never going to have that experience again. Time to get on this ladder of money. Or realized when I was 7 that I was the darkest kid in school and everybody was going to hate me. And so now I got to figure out how to navigate beauty from some gaze that is not my own. And, maybe that is involved in the things that I buy and the way I dye my hair or skin lightening cream, or maybe it's the way that I talk and the people that I choose to surround myself with so that I at least have access to this world that is more valuable than me. And by proximity, I'll be valuable. There are all of these stories that we have that situate us on the ladder. And so I think the first step is to actually allow ourselves to get with the story, to be in recollection of what that means. And then from there are, like I said, these just everyday practical tools. So in the back of the book, I give 10 tools to radical self-love. And so there are things that we can begin to do on a daily basis to sort of jumpstart this process of getting off the ladder and getting back into our own guidance. Tool number 1 is dump the junk. It's all about recognizing all the messages that we take in every day that reaffirm the ladder inside of us, that reaffirm our attempt to scale the ladder outside of us. How do we start taking away some of those messages from a conscious place so that we have internal spaciousness to imagine a different way of being? Oftentimes, we just can't see another way to interact with the world except through this ladder of hierarchy. But that's also because it's the only thing blaring in our ears 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so there's an opportunity to unplug from that or to lower the volume of that so that we can better hear our own radical self-love self. Because that voice is always trying to talk to us. It's always trying to communicate what would bring us peace, power, joy, pleasure, and ease. It's always trying to get us there. And oftentimes we just can't hear it over this external voice, the outside voice inside of us that is so loud. So removing some of those external things that make that outside voice louder. And there are all kinds of things. 2 most important tools in the back of the book that I tell folks to do. And I'm like, you could do all the other things. If you don't do these 2, you're going to struggle in your radical self-love journey. And tool number 9 is be in community. The ladder expects us to believe in individualism. It's about climbing. It's about crushing the fingers of the person below you. It's about pulling down the person above you to get above them. And the entire system is about individualism. And it is inside of community, one, that we recognize we're not alone, that we recognize we're not the only people having this experience, the only people thinking these thoughts, the only people trying to try on something new. And it also gives us the collective power to challenge the system in a structural and systemic way. It is the power of organizing. That is what organizers do. The power of organizing is to bring together enough bodies to disrupt the system, to disrupt the ladder. Being in community is an essential part of our radical self-love journey. Tool number 10 is the most important. You could do everything else. If you don't do tool number 10, you're going to struggle. You're just not going to get it. You'll be entrenched on that ladder. And that is give yourself some grace. That as soon as we approach this journey as like some destination, some endpoint we're trying to get to, again, we're back in ladder thinking. As soon as there's some place you get to, then you're inside the ladder and you're not inside radical self-love. But beyond that is like perfection is the enemy of ease. My friend Prentice says perfectionism is the commitment to a habitual relationship with self-doubt. I was like, yeah, it is a weddedness to never actually being in self-love. It is a weddedness to never feeling good enough because perfection is an illusion. It cannot actually be achieved. So to constantly be striving for it is to be constantly striving for that which you will never have, which means that you'll never be good enough. It makes its own gravy, as I like to say.
And like also who set the terms of what was perfect? And even if we think we did, it's very unlikely that it came from our like soul truth.
Exactly. Because our soul truth isn't contracted. Like that's how you know it's not. Our soul truth isn't some finite, easily punch that into that and it fits perfectly reality. That's not humanity. So as soon as we are operating in something that feels like that neat and tidy, it's a great marker that we're probably off of radical self-love and back on the ladder. But giving ourselves grace allows us to be expansive in the fullness of our humanity. I tell people all the time, I run an entire organization solely about radical self-love. And there are days I don't feel very loving toward my body. My assignment on that day is to love the Sonya that doesn't feel very loving towards her body until she loves her body again. I love you, Sonya, who doesn't feel good enough today. I love you, Sonya, who feels not liking your cellulite today. I love you, Sonya, who feels like you didn't get it right again. I love you, Sonya, who feels unlovable. And the more that I practice that, the more spaciousness comes back inside of me. And that spaciousness is how I feel into my own radical self-love.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation. How does this then take us into the co-creation of where our soul truth wants to take us, of that new garment?
Our radical self-love journey is not an individual journey, because there's no way to talk about my own indoctrination into the ladder without thinking about all the other people who are on that ladder and the ways in which I've been taught to relate to the other people on that ladder, the ways I've been taught to think about them, the ways I've been taught to compare myself to them, and to also think about the world and the way the world has taught me. Like, what are the messages that the world has about those other people on that ladder? What is the messages the world has about my body and the people who share similar bodies on that ladder? And so as I begin to think about that, I begin to become aware of the larger systems and structures that are at play. A radical self-love that does not activate you towards changing something in the world so that everybody gets to get off the ladder. Because as long as the ladder exists, you will always be in the threat of having to get back on the ladder. It will always be calling you back. The ultimate work, the sort of self-actualized work of radical self-love, is to destroy the ladder. We cannot do that individually. We must do that in co-creation. We must do that in relationship with the other people who have been impacted by the ladder. That is where being in community comes in. All of them are connected. All of these systems are connected. All of these systems are designed to keep us disconnected from ourselves and disconnected from each other. But we also can't do all of them at the same time. I can't manage all of them at the same time, but I can figure out where my area of influence is, where my passion is, where my soul wants me to be putting my energy. And then I can find the other people who are aligned with that. The key is to never forget that your part is still connected to all those other systems. How do we do our part with that recognition always at play? How do I do the work of radical self-love, recognizing that it cannot be disconnected? It cannot be disconnected from climate change. I could radically love myself on a planet that doesn't exist anymore. That'll be that'll be cute, right? And recognizing, right, the degradation of the physical world is still about the need to dominate something outside of myself, because that's how I achieve my sense of worth. So always recognizing that all of the systems are interconnected, that they are intertwined. And whatever I am doing, I need to do it with an awareness of its implications, of how its threads are connected to the other threads of the ladder. I need to make sure that I am weaving a full garment and not just like, I made the sleeve, I don't know what the rest of that shit's going to look like, right? But with a vision for what the full garment looks like. And that is about being in community and being in connection with the ways in which our community is connected to the full tapestry of what it is we want to make.
Yeah. I'm just sitting with it. Yeah, I really resonate with this kind of sense of finding our own part, our own thread in the bigger picture, so that we don't get swallowed by the complexity, because that's another way that the ladder says, well, if you just do this, it's kind of easy. It's not easy, but they make out that it's easy, right? That you follow these steps. And when you're trying to really liberate yourself and all that is asking to be liberated in our world, it can get very heavy in the complexity if we see complexity as something overwhelming. And I found great solace and empowerment, a lot of like energy for my activism in really embracing the complexity. And that has freed up so much that was getting really confused. Also, probably with some of that wanting to do it perfectly, that also is a very heavy way to approach radical anything. because yeah, you come in and you're like, oh, and I love this notion of what's so important about joy and about pleasure, and Adrienne Marie Brown's work about pleasure activism, staying connected to joy as our birthright, in the same way that our worthiness is our birthright, being able to be charged like by that. And that is so much more pronounced when we're in community and we're able to celebrate together.
Yeah, there's such an opportunity for us to, I'm interested in the magnification of these experiences, right? And the magnification of these experiences happens inside community. They happen when we have reflections of the change. And that's the reason why community is so necessary, because otherwise it just feels daunting. It feels impossible. Again, if we just keep our barometer on, does it give me peace, power, joy, pleasure, or ease? As soon as I'm in something and I feel overwhelmed and daunted and, impossible, then I know I'm outside of the way in which radical self-love would like me to be moving. One of the tools is tool number 5 is banish the binary. Its entire intention is to free us from this sort of dichotomous thinking, this either or thinking that doesn't have spaciousness, that doesn't have complexity in it, that doesn't acknowledge that whatever they sold you, they told you was going to be real simple and real easy and was going to fix all your problems, has never worked. It doesn't work. Whatever it was they offered, it did not work.
Whether it's a diet or a mortgage or
this cool pyramid scheme, quick money thing, like it never works. And so what banishing the binary does is it's like, right, the answers actually live inside the complexity. The answers live inside the nuance. Because the more that I can accept the complexity inside myself, the messy, uncertain, this way one day and that way the nextness of my own being, the more that I can recognize it in the world and have grace for it. But again, if I cannot give it to myself, then I cannot be it or recognize it or extend it to the world. There really is an invitation for us to embrace the complex messiness that is humanity and to stop thinking that it's going to be easy, because the easy thing they've tried to give us has never worked. And so we can just go on ahead and rest assured that is probably not the answer. The answer is going to be inside the grappling, inside the lake, tossing and turning and mulling it over. And that is okay. Like, we've got to let that be okay.
And how important do you feel vision is within the work of radical self-love? To have a vision, not just for yourself, but for the future, for the bigger picture?
I think it's essential. Radical self-love gives us the foundation to create vision. Through our work of radical self-love, through the desire to return to our inherent selves, all of a sudden there is, again, this idea of spaciousness. There's an expanded possibility for what can exist in the world. The first place to practice that vision is inside of ourselves. What do I want for my own life? What's that expanded vision for me? And then from that expanded vision we have for ourselves, we actually start to recognize that in order to actually get to it, we're going to have to create the conditions in the world to get there. That is the vision that we get to live into. What keeps us disconnected from radical self-love is the way in which our past dictates who we get to be and who we're going to be. And the work of radical self-love is about removing that past, removing the story of that past as the definitive treatise on who we are in the world and who we'll get to be in the world. And then once it's out, once the past is, like just the past and not who I am, just the past, then I actually get to say, well, who am I? Who am I without the ladder that I've been clinging to based on those stories from the past? Who am I without that structure there? It is from that place that we get to then say, okay, this is who I am. And who do I want to be? What else do I want to invite into the fullness that is already me? Because I think the other piece is the vision is not about attaining something that doesn't exist. The vision is about unlocking that which is already inside of us. So if I start from, I already am, what's in the way of me feeling it? What's in the way of me living into it? What's in the way of me knowing that I know that I know that I know? What's that? Now, how do we move that thing so that the more of me can come into the world, to the me that already exists inside of me? How do I activate that more powerfully in the world?
Yeah, it's a powerful reframe when we acknowledge that we have all these different parts of ourselves and we can choose which part we feed. The ladder's been feeding a certain part of us, so we can choose to feed the part that can see something completely different to that. And I found, like, when I started The Future is Beautiful, it was called Think Act Vote at the time. It was in an election year in the UK. And I was feeling into this notion that we could no longer vote for the vision that we wanted to have created in the world, right? And trust that, like, this politician, this party is going to do it for us. And so actually, we all needed to be empowered with the sense of our own worth and the understanding that what we're doing with our time and our money and our energy is shaping our future. What I found really interesting is we built this ballot box and we had these cards and it would say, like, the future I choose is ... and you would vote with your vision. And it was an exercise in opening up that dialogue, that permission to be worthy enough to have a vision for the world. There's two things that I found really interesting about it that relate to radical self-love. And one is that most people felt really kind of terrified to have a vision, to articulate a vision, like, well, who am I to say this? And also, what's the point? This kind of powerlessness and this not enoughness and other people to decide things like that. And what I found really interesting was that even when I started then for the book, I started to approach people as well as just kind of doing it as a street project so that it would be more thought through, that people could write the thing at home and send it to me rather than just kind of, whilst they're out and about doing whatever they're doing. And sometimes people wouldn't respond for like ages. And I would have to be like, hey, are you going to send that in? Like, what's happening with that? And actually, it was always the same reason. It was like, I don't know what to say. And I'd be like, but you're running a social enterprise that's changing the world. Like, you could just write about that. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. And it was really interesting to me how much we've been deconditioned away from our innate worthiness to see what we see, what we want to see, and to move towards it. The other aspect that is interesting is this like notion of people can be kind of cynical. So if you say like, I want to live in a world that's more respectful of people or more like peaceful, well, that's really unrealistic. And actually, there are so many examples of that. And the way that you framed it is really powerful, that like it already exists. It's not something that doesn't exist, that humans have never known, that has never been part of the fabric of this world. It's just been chopped up and some of the cuttings are like on the factory floor. And we just need to bring them back into focus. And then suddenly it all just feels so possible.
Yeah. I opened the book by using this example from a Marianne Williamson talk, where she says an acorn doesn't have to say, I intend to become an oak tree. Like an acorn has inside of it all of the machinations that it needs to become an oak tree, as long as we don't mess with it. As long as we don't obstruct it, as long as we don't drop it on the cement rather than on fertile soil, as long as we don't mess up the world so it doesn't rain and it can't get the nutrients it needs, it will become what it is supposed to become. And we all have inside of us that same mechanism, that same ability to become all it is that we were designed to become, that we came here to become. And the work is not to figure out how to become the thing. The work is to make sure that the conditions exist so that we can. That is what radical self-love is activating the inside of the acorn. And that when we activate the inside of the acorn, we also acknowledge that it's happening in a world where we have to create the conditions for that activation to thrive. And once we recognize that it's already in there, we can let go of the striving. That's the ladder, right? Like the striving is the ladder. It's the idea that I got to figure out how to be good enough. Once we recognize that it's already there, we can stop trying to figure out how to do things, and we can start saying what needs to be undone so that which wants to naturally come forth has the space to do so.
And then if for some reason the acorn has ended up in the wrong place, like how can we just nudge it back to where it needs to be?
Yeah, right. How do we just gently move it back to, how do we pick each other up and put us in our best soil? I love that as a vision for us as a collective. How do we scoop up all of us and put us in our best soil?
Yes. I love like the relating back to the personal and the collective and that relationship with radical self-love. And there was one part of the book where, you give that example of like the girlfriends hanging out in the dressing room and that kind of self-deprecation thing that happens. And, I really struggled with my friendships in my teens and in my 20s. I hated having to do that. I loved to celebrate with clothes. I loved where textiles came from, like coming from that Indian background, like the colors and the appreciation of the work. And I hated that if I put something on that like felt good, that I would walk into a room of my friends and they would be like, oh, that would look so awful on me. And almost like I would have to be like, oh, I'm sorry, or they'd be like, that looks really nice on you, in a tone that I would feel I'd have to apologize for, that I was enjoying it. It's all right for you. You could get away with anything. Or like one that I got a lot was like, oh, well, yeah, because of your skin, you can just wear like any color. And I'm like, yeah, there are some other things that the skin like gives me that are slightly more complex and challenging for my life. But you're right, I can wear orange. And yeah, I found that really hard because I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be able to support and lift up my sisters. What I found is that actually, when I did that, it came off somehow within the ladder scope of self-deprecation and like who's worse. But then even just my wanting to celebrate each other was like, I was, what's that word? I haven't been called it in so long, but like, righteous and like being too serious and like couldn't take the joke and thought I was better than everyone else. And it was just so tiring. With a lot of tears, I just sort of went, I'm just like not going to have friends until I can find ones where we're really willing to celebrate ourselves and to just change that paradigm of celebrating ourselves and each other. And also being able to like be honest. So you could say like, actually, that really doesn't suit you, but it's not because you're like an awful, unworthy person. It's just that this might suit you better. And this might bring out something of your soul beauty. When I was reading that, it took me back to that place. And then it made me feel so grateful that I have created a life in which that's not what happens anymore.
Yeah. Well, good for you for recognizing it. I think so for so many of us, we see that dynamic operating. And even if it feels inauthentic to us, the pressure to acquiesce becomes so intense that we just go along. It's like, fine, you're right. Now I will participate in the act of self-deprecation as camaraderie in order to have camaraderie. It's a really powerful and lonely road to say, I just won't have friends. but what it also means is you recognize that's not friendship. It's a radical self-love choice to say, I recognize that the thing I'm being offered isn't even what I want. So I'll just wait for what I want. And it's an uncomfortable place. Again, this is why I say like radical self-love is a simple notion. It isn't an easy notion. And it isn't easy because we don't live in a world where radical self-love is mainstream. We don't live in a world where we are taught to stand in our authenticity and trust that others will do the same. To choose to do that is to choose to take the road less traveled. It can be a really challenging one. And that's why I say it's important to find community, to find the people, to find your people. And that may take some time. And the work is to, as best as possible, not despair in the meantime, to trust that that which you desires you, and that which you want to come into your world wants to arrive.
Absolutely. And we're so lucky in these times in that we have the beauty of the internet in the way that it helps us to find and create community. And my response to that was after like the lonely years and the grief and the going through looking at Facebook where they were all at someone's wedding that I wasn't invited to, and feeling that like, was that I just started to create community based on the values of radical self-love, of a beautiful future, of a space where we are able to be authentic and lift each other up in service of the collective.
Me too. So much of my community has been built in the digital sphere. The work of the body is not an apology is a digital work before it was anything else. And it's been beautiful watching people who are kindred spirits be able to find each other, be able to make their way to each other because sort of the boundaries of geography have been released through this digital platform.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you, in your own life and in these times as well, where many of us are still isolating or with minimal kind of human social contact, how are you finding that, and how are you able to live in radical self-love with this the beauty of the digital space, and then like also what still remains?
I think the digital world is such a great example of the both and, right? It is both connecting and very disconnecting. It is both everybody and no one at the same time. I actually shared that with a friend the other day. I said it's a very interesting dynamic to belong to everyone and belong to no one in some ways. Certainly in this very physical realm, in this place where I am alone. For me, it has been a beautiful opportunity to expand what I call friendship and who I call friend. The birds are my friends, and the ocean is my friend. And who I can't touch physically as a human being, I can touch things that are part of my world that remind me that I'm connected to something larger. And that has been such a powerful and healing part of my radical self-love journey in this time of pandemics and this time of isolation. And I think it's, again, if we're going to spread things, the idea that like we are connected to the planet that we are on. And so how do we build relationship there so that it feels nourishing in the way that other humans have felt nourishing? How do we make the planet our friend in the same way that we are looking for a friendship, particularly since it's the one that can show up, that we can touch and feel right now? What does it look like to hug a tree? Go hug a tree.
Absolutely.
There are the opportunities to reconceptualize connection. From my radical self-love journey, it's been about letting myself do that. And then also being more intentional about relationship and not looking for it in social media likes, not looking for it in who watched my post and who didn't. And to actually be like, where are the relationships that ground me? Where are the relationships that deeply, deeply ground me? And how do I build those? How do I be in more direct, intimate conversation? How do I belong to a smaller group of people in some ways, in deeper, in more depthful ways than I have been historically? Yeah, I feel like there's this opportunity to move away from the width of things and into the depth of relationship. That's what's been really powerful for me in these last months.
Yeah, I can relate to everything that you just shared and the beautiful invitation of depth and of having that opportunity to really redefine like what it is that you want. And I think, that question of like, how do you spend your time and your money and your energy? It's much easier to be very intentional around that in these times where we're not being pulled in any of the ways that just we always were. We're actually having an opportunity to say, when I do start to leave my house more,
Right.
where might I go? And why am I going there? And what is that really nourishing?
Yeah. It's an offering for greater intentionality that we get to be intentional about how we are moving in the world. We get to be way more thoughtful. In some ways, we've been taken off of autopilot. And it's like, oh, right. No, where am I flying this plane to? And why? Why am I going there? Is that the route I want to take?
Yeah. What's your favorite way of celebrating yourself during this time?
That's a great question. And it's an ever evolving one. It's an area of challenge for me because I can be the kind of person who's like, all right, I did the thing. What's the next thing? Yeah, it's been an area of growth to like intentionally celebrate. Fresh flowers. Beauty is such an essential part of my world, an essential part of my well-being. And so I'm giving myself what feels vibrant and beautiful. So I bought bedding. And speaking of intentional buying, I bought bedding for my bed the other day. And I was like, right, I want to sleep. When I sleep, I want to feel like I'm in something pretty. And so I bought a really beautiful duvet and pillowcases and shams. And that felt like a celebration of myself. I have what I like to call a decadence practice. In some ways, all of these things fit into that, where it's just like, what feels really lush and vibrant and depthful, and how do I bring more of that into my life? And so that can be through meals, my shrimp and asparagus scampi gnocchi that I had for dinner with a coconut custard pie with caramelized bananas on top.
Wow.
That was my dinner last night. And for me, that's like part of my decadence practice is like when I want to really like care for myself, I give myself something that feels decadent and beautiful. And that's definitely one of the ways of celebrating myself. And then I've been working on giving more opportunities for the people that I love to celebrate with me. Like, talk about the good thing that happened, Sonya. Like, share the experience with people that care so that they can cheerlead you and root you on.
That was going to be the last question, but then you said that beauty was so central for you, and this is The Future is Beautiful. And we're exploring beauty in so many different ways. And one aspect of that is beautiful leadership and what it means to live in beautiful leadership. It's very similar to radical self-love. I wonder if you can just share with us a little bit about what beauty means to you and how you live in beauty.
Yeah. So beauty, it's so difficult to give language to beauty. And I feel like a long time ago, I stopped doing it because it just feels so confined, so restrictive to the ways in which we conceptualize it right now. And I far more understand it as a feeling, as an essence, as an energy, that which makes me come alive. I think about a flower or a plant, particularly my plants inside of my home, and the way if you haven't watered them in a few days, or if they've been in a place where the sunlight isn't hitting them, they physically manifest that they aren't receiving that which makes them come alive. And then when you give it to them, they're like, oh, hello. And it's like watching them come into being. And for me, a thing coming into being is beautiful. And whatever it is that facilitates coming into being is beautiful. And for me, sometimes that's a decadence practice, but that's also like watching people change and transform, watching the impossible become possible, watching us galvanize towards this more beautiful future. So all of those things to me are what's beautiful. And sometimes that gets displayed in these very aesthetic ways. And then sometimes it's not aesthetic at all. It is just a resonance. It's just a vibration. And I try to lean into whatever it is that is awakening to its own aliveness. That is beauty to me.
Yes. I both felt myself coming more alive as you were speaking, and I felt how much I needed to water these plants.
Good. You are coming alive, and then you are recognizing what else wants to come alive around you.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And that's how the personal and the collective.
Exactly. That's how we spread it.
How it works.
How we spread it.
Yeah. Sonya, it has just been so delicious to spend this time with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
What are the best ways for people to get in contact with you and to explore deeper your work?
Yeah, you can visit me on my website, SonyaReneeTaylor.com. I hang out on Instagram quite a bit, and you can do that at Sonya Renee Taylor. You can also check out the work of The Body is Not an Apology. We're a digital magazine, and so we're a repository of thousands of articles about the intersection of radical self-love, body identity, and social justice at thebodyisnotanapology.com, and also on all the social media platforms at The Body is Not an Apology.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mentioned in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?